Welcome back, Structure Fishing. I'm Jim Shell, and I've got another lake breakdown for you, Lake Wisconsin. I'm sure many of you watching this saw my previous video when I was preparing to do this breakdown of Lake Wisconsin. It reminded me so much of all the spoon plugging history, structure fishing history, Buck Perry history, that I made a separate video just on all that. If you haven't seen it, check out the video just before this. But let's get right into it. I don't want to waste much time. Lake Wisconsin is a reservoir off of the Wisconsin River system. It is a pretty old reservoir. The dam at Prairie du Sac was started in 1911 and finished in 1914. It's like a 105 years old reservoir. There's the dam there. Now, when people talk about Lake Wisconsin, they're pretty much talking about just this widening portion of the Wisconsin River. Um, Once you get past this area here, which is just south of Moon Valley, you're pretty much the original river here. And then when you get up past the headwaters over here, it's pretty much the original river as well. Uh, Real quick, let's just go over the Wisconsin River. Being a reservoir located on the Wisconsin River, as well as Castle Rock and Pinot Noir flowage, there is no closed season except for maybe muskies. But for walleye and sauger, it is open year round. So it does get a fair share of fishing pressure, especially in the fall. Lake Wisconsin population wise, fish species wise, is dominantly walleye and saugers. I'd probably say 90% of people out there fishing are fishing for walleye and saugers. It has an excellent population of both. I would say after that, the white bass population is probably next, and that fluctuates quite a bit. I personally have, back in the mid 80s or early 90s, it had a huge population of white bass. I mean, where you can go there and you can get, I think back then the limit was 25 fish, and you can easily do that anytime you went out there. And they were all good fish. It hasn't been that way since then. Um, they really seem to be hit or miss, but white bass are still in there in fair numbers. And then you do have somewhat of a building population of smallmouth bass. When I'm out there, well, crappies as well. I was just going to say, when I'm out there crappie fishing, I'll catch occasional smallies. But I enjoy fishing this lake mostly for crappies, tell you the truth. And it's really not nearly as popular for crappies as it is for walleye and saugers. Um, I have fished this lake quite a bit in my early days. I really don't fish here much in the summer anymore, and that's not because it's not good. It's still an excellent lake. It's just because there's so many other lakes to fish. I'm trying to fish every one. It's going to take a lifetime, but I'm working on it. That's why I primarily don't fish here that much in the summer, although I was out here a couple of years ago. Matter of fact, I'll put that link of that trip in the description below. Check that out if you want to see a more recent walleye video out here. At the end of this video, I'll also have some archive footage back in '92, I think, of me fishing the headwaters. But let's dive right into the structure here. First off, up until, well, let me flip over to Navy Onyx here. And the Navy Onyx, this didn't become HD mapped until, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago. Prior to that, you had a basic map from Clark's Map Company, I think it was called. It was worthless. I couldn't find my copy anymore, probably because it's completely worthless. But I only found this small snippet on the internet, and it was worthless. The contour maps they had really didn't do you anything at all. Um, but now that they've mapped the lake HD, and it is fairly accurate, I'd say, if from what I've seen on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being lousy, 10 being it's just like the lake, I would probably say this is a 8 maybe. It's a fairly accurate map. The only thing that's not very accurate is up in the headwaters, and that's because with the when you get up in the headwaters, up around here, the current becomes noticeable, and the sandbars, the bottom will change. So you know it will the structures up in headwaters can change from year to year. Speaking of that, when I'm talking about current, um, they because there's so many homes on this lake, they keep this elevation pretty constant the whole entire year. It doesn't fluctuate. If it does fluctuate, it's less than 3 or 4 inches, no more. At the very most, 6 inches underneath a severe uh, rainstorm or rainfall. But it pretty much stays current constant. Such as in Pinwell flowage, in the wintertime, late fall, it's probably 6 feet down than what it normally is. I'm not sure about Castle Rock. There's homes on Castle Rock. I'm not sure if that elevation fluctuates or not, but I know for a fact that Pinwell does fluctuate a bit, but Lake Wisconsin does not. And I guess when I'm talking about the entire Wisconsin river system here, I should mention the regulations really quick. Um, Up for most of the river system, up until the Prairie du Sac Dam, so from the Prairie du Sac Dam upstream, which would be Lake Wisconsin, Castle Rock, Pinwell, there's a slot limit. You can keep 5 walleyes, and they have to be a minimum of 15 inches to 20 inches. And you cannot keep any between 20 and 28, and you're allowed 1 over 28 if you happen to get that 1 over 28, which would be a trophy fish. Um, they started that slot limit, I'm guessing, roughly 20 years ago. So if I show you some of these older pictures, it was before they had the slot limit in effect. Um, let's see. So let's just start talking about the structures here. First off is many of you may know walleye and saugers are migratory fish, which means in the spring they'll make a run up towards the headwaters. And not all the fish will run up and spawn in the river. Some spawn in the lake. Percentage-wise, I really couldn't tell you. I'd be guessing, but I would say probably more than half the fish probably make that run up the headwaters. But you probably have a decent population of fish that will spawn within the lake basin itself. And when I'm talking about the headwaters, maybe someone that knows for sure can leave it in the comments, but I believe from Lake Wisconsin, you can probably boat maybe about a mile or so north of the I-90 bridge as it crosses the lake. It seems to me that it gets very shallow, and I don't think it's really boatable by a motorboat, maybe by a kayak canoe. Obviously, you can get through, but I don't think you can really boat it until you get maybe around this area. And from here, you get pretty good depth, pretty consistent depth, and you can probably boat it all the way up to the Wisconsin Dells Dam. Matter of fact, while I'm talking about it here, Casey and I fished below the dam here just earlier this past fall. I'll leave a link to that video down below, as well as a video of us fishing here, I think 2 years ago, early summer, fishing out here. It's been many years since I fished out here in the summer, and it was actually pretty fun doing it. But let's get back to the structure here. Fishing the headwaters. This Navionics map really doesn't start showing you the details that much up in the headwaters, because it does change pretty year to year. It does here's where one part where I don't know how accurate the map is. It does show you that you got some deeper holes here. Those holes might be there. There's a steep bank here that's, I think, I can't tell, it's over here. But when I'm fishing the headwaters, I'm usually fishing right around here, this area here, and mostly this area here. The structures you're going to find there are going to be pretty subtle break lines. I mean, they are break lines, but they're going to drop, it might be like a 1 to 2 foot break line, dropping from like, say, 6 feet down to 8 feet or down to 9 feet. So, as you go up towards the headwaters, it's going to have a tendency to be a little bit more shallower structures as well, too. But you do have, like I say, a good break line that runs just off the shoreline here that I'll fish. Well, see, like I say, this map, it's really not that accurate up in the headwaters here. But you do have a good break line on close to this shoreline here, and up around here. It's really not showing it here, but typically you'll find a good bar or break lines out in this area and over here too. At the end of this video, I'll show you a clip from 1992, I think, of my friend Bob Rose and I fishing the headwaters up here, having some good times up here. But timing-wise, the headwaters, this area, usually you have your best fishing through the month of May. Typically on a normal year, the last 2 weeks of May is probably prime time for fishing over here. June 1st seems to be, or that first week in June seems to be the cutoff when you'll have less fish in the headwaters and you'll have much better chance catching fish when you get into the main lake here about the 1st of June, that first full week of June. And let me zoom in okay, now we can see the break lines here. The existing river channel came right through here, and you can still see that this is like the southern channel break line right here, and the northern channel, it wasn't as well defined, but you do have a bit of a break line on the north side of it over here. You got the railroad bridge crossing here, you got the ferry going across here, just to give you some reference on where you're at. And that break line goes from about here all the way out to here. It's a pretty good solid break line. The video link below is Casey and I fishing this early June. Can't remember if it was 2020 or 2019. But links down below. Check out that video after this if you want to see us catching some fish more recently. But this is a very good break line. And what I want to show you, give me 1 second here. I got to find it and pull it up. Okay, I have Terry O'Malley. If some of you watched my last video, or some of you that don't know Terry O'Malley, he was the first person that worked for Buck Perry. In I think the early to mid 60s, he started working for Buck, and he was an excellent structure fisherman. He made structure maps, and just for kicks, I'm going to show you some of the structure maps that Terry made, and show you how they look on avionics. It's striking how some of them are so dead on, and some of them are pretty close. But I'm going to show you. All right, let me pull up this one. This is probably the least, I don't want to say accurate, but it really doesn't look. I fished this break line. It is pretty straight like this. What Navionics shows here is pretty accurate, but this is what Terry made back in the early mid 60s of that area here. There's a definite break line coming up here. It sort of fades out, and a little slight break line on the other side here. Looks like it turns and goes down over here. This is the only one map that Terry made that doesn't look that similar to the actual Navionics map, but I guarantee you this is the break line that Terry was fishing over there in this map here. And then, okay, the next area is just south of the railroad bridge. You have a distinct break line, what would be like the southern part of the channel here, and on the northern channel here going down over here. Really good break line. Again, this is probably early to midsummer, about roughly early June, probably throughout the summer as well. This break line here, as well as this one over here, all the way down to this over here. And I'm going to show you what Terry map looked like for this area when he mapped this. And it's pretty same. You can see it's not a very distinct break line here, but you do have it's like a couple of foot break line that goes out here. And on the north side here, you'll get, it's a very slight break line. And this area here, you see where he says big walleyes, white bass, and saugers right here. What you're looking at right there is this right over here. Just to give you some relationship on what it looks like here. So this break line's good. This break line's good. I personally think that this is a better break line, or seems to be more productive, but this can be very productive as well too. The next structure area as we're coming down over here is Sunset Bay. You've got you can see on the map here, this shows it really well here. I mean, you got a very distinct break line going across the bay here, and it turns. You got almost like a hump at the end of the bar here. Turns, comes in, it sort of fades out. But then if you look at it here, it sort of comes really tight to shore here, and you probably have somewhat of a break line coming out over here. This is one area where we'll look at Terry's map, where it looks very similar to what you're seeing over here. I'm going to try to pull it up on the screen here too. You can see same thing. You're coming out over here. It comes out, turns and comes in. This is sort of that hump at the end over here. Comes out, and this really isn't a break line, or it's very shallow structural break line, but your main break line is this right over here. And then maybe when you get to the point over here, and this is Terry even wrote over here, most of the bar can be bumped, not much brush. Walleyes and white bass come up here, and it starts about mostly 9-10 feet. As you go further down the break line, it gets like a foot or two deeper. So that's this break line all the way out over to here. And I fish this, every time I fish this in the summer, I've always caught walleyes and saugers here. One thing about fishing this lake, ever since they imposed a slot limit, you seem to get a lot of shorts out here. So, you'll get a lot of action, but you'll probably have to at times, weed through. Maybe every 5 or 6 shorts you might get one fish that's legal. But this is a very consistent break line, produces fish quite often over here. Now the next area, as we go down here, we really don't have now I'm only going over the main structures. There's several what I'll call secondary structures, but I'm just going over the main structures that consistently produce. And the next one here is the break line you have in front of Moon Valley. This back here is Moon Valley. As you can see here, you've got the main channel comes in pretty close to shore over here, and then it swings out a little bit. And you've got this very distinct break line going across Moon Valley over here. And this is another excellent break line to fish. But this one's a little tricky because there are a lot of snags, as I found out, and it hasn't changed back when, let me find Terry's map over here. Here's Terry's map. Now, this is flipped. On the Navionics, north is up. On this map, north is to the bottom here. So if you flip this 180 degrees, that's how you'd be looking at it over here. But as Terry even mentions in his map over here, brushy, heavy brush, and there is heavy brush. You gotta be really good in running your lures if you're trolling, just to be ticking the brush really, or just to be off the brush. But it is very brushy. But brush in the fall, especially on a break line, crappies. I do a lot of my crappie fishing over here because of that brush. But it is a really good spot for walleye, saugers, and white bass, and in the fall, crappies. Pretty much catch everything. This is a very break line here is very consistent producer pretty much all summer long. Walleye, saugers, white bass, and crappies, and in the fall as well too. Very good break line, other than the fact that there are a lot of trees or brush in the water, and I didn't mention that yet. This lake, especially for being over 100 years old, there are a lot of trees that are just above the surface of the water. I'm surprised, as old as the reservoir is, that those trees still remain. And there's a lot of them. You can sort of see on the Navionics, you'll see stump. Those are trees. There's some areas that are, I think right over here. Well, it's not showing them. Oh yeah, just north of the railroad. So here you can see stump. There's a lot of standing trees on this lake. In the summer, well, in the boating season, from probably April to late October, early November, they have markers out here telling you where the main channel is, so you don't have to worry about hitting a stump out here. But you do have quite a few stumps scattered in the lake here, so you got to be cautious and keep your eyes open on that. Those are the main structures in the lake. Once again, you fish the headwaters up until pretty much April, May, up until the end of May. By about June 1st, then you want to get into the main lake, and you got a major structure situation here should be pretty easy to find, and it's pretty clean. You got, so that's our main lake structure number 1 over here. You got these break lines here, and over here is number 2. You got the break line in Sunset Bay, number 3, and then you've got the main break line here on Moon Valley area number 4. Those are the 4 main areas of the lake to fish. Going further down the lake though, and I didn't know about this spot until I saw it on Navionics, is you got this hump right over here. 9 out of 10 times when I go by on this lake, there's 9 out of 10 times there's a boat there. At least one boat, sometimes 2, sometimes 3. But a couple of times I've gone by, there has not been a boat on this structure. I've caught crappies and walleye and saugers out here. Case and I sort of nicknamed it the community hump because there's always someone on it. But it's a small structure. Really, if you fish it correctly, there's only one position to be on it. If there's more than one boat on there, someone's not in position. But if you happen to go by, you don't see a boat on there, find that hump. It's such a small structure, I don't even troll it. I just anchor on top of it and I just fan cast around it. But that's I'll call it a secondary structure, not really a main structure. And once you get past this bay over here, all the way you get to the dam, it's just pretty much, the river channel, existing river channel. You do have a slight bar when you get down here. I don't even know if this has a name, this area here, but it is pretty much like it's shown here. You can fish this, and this should be a really good structure to hold walleyes later in the summer. I would say July, August, September. I have crappie fished out here in the fall and caught walleyes while I was crappie fishing. But I've never fished here specifically in the summertime, but I'm pretty sure that there's fish down here. So I would probably fish this area more towards late summer. And there's according to Navionics, there's a bar sticks out over here. I haven't fished this, but I would think that this would be a very good structure late summer as well too. But that's your main structures on the lake. You got good watercolor being on the Wisconsin River. Well, I should say it's like a brown cypress watercolor. It's an okay watercolor. You will get a good algae bloom out here in the summer as well too, which is always a good thing for fishing. Let me tell you about a couple of really good stories on this lake. There was a spoon plugger in our club when we first started. His name was Richard Merman. Great guy, excellent structure fisherman. He was an older guy. I had the privilege of fishing with him once when shortly, like the second year of the club. He did pass away probably about 25 years ago, but he spent a lot of time fishing Lake Wisconsin, especially in the early days. I'd say in the mid 60s and on, and he caught tons of fish out here. And I got a couple of really good stories that I heard firsthand directly from Richard, so I know these stories are true. Richard was never a BSer at all. And he would catch, now back in the early 60s, mid 60s, if you had a structure map like Terry had, if you knew where these structures were at, I mean, it had a tremendous population of walleyes. It was actually really not difficult at all unless you had bad weather conditions. You were pretty much guaranteed you were going to get at least a good limit of walleyes. And Richard fished here a lot, and Richard caught so many walleyes. I think some people were a little bit suspicious of what that he wasn't doing that he was doing something illegal. So it was bought to some people, I think, bought it to the attention of the local DNR. So the DNR would foul him all the time and check him all the time, thinking he was doing something illegal, and he wasn't. And one time the DNR checked him. He even asked, "Can I look through your tackle box?" Richard's got nothing to hide. He said, "Sure." So the guy opens up his tackle box, looks through it, and he says, "I don't have to ask you what you caught him on, because it was all nothing but spoon plugs. His whole tackle box was nothing but spoon plugs." But that's not the funny story. I got two more stories Richard told. Richard would take his son out with him when he was very young. I would say probably 2, 2.5, 3 years old. And the first time he took him out with him, um, he hooked on a big walleye and it jerked the rod out of his hand. And he lost the rod and reel into the water. So the next time Richard took him fishing, he took a piece of small rope, tied it around his son's wrist, and tied it to the fishing pole so he wouldn't lose it. Hooked another big fish. He started going, and it started pulling him off of his seat. So then Richard had to stop the boat, grab him from going into the lake. So the next time he went out, Richard tied the rope to the fishing pole to his hand, and then he took a rope around his son's waist and tied that to the boat to keep him inside the boat. But the best story Richard told by far was I think every year the church that Richard went to, they would always do a fish fry. And it was about 2 weeks away from the fish fry, and people in the church asked Richard, hey, how's the fishing been? You got enough fish for the fish fry? Richard said, no, no. What are like, well, it's in 2 weeks. He goes, oh yeah, I know. Don't worry, we'll have more than enough fish. And then the week before the fish fry, Richard's got no fish. He's like, don't worry about it. I'm going to go out now. We'll get the fish. So Richard took, I'm not sure how many kids, but he took a carload or a bus load of kids with him to Lake Wisconsin. And he'd take one kid in the boat. They're all waiting at the dock. He took one kid at a time, went out there, got 5 fish. If you're under 16, you don't need a license. So he took one kid out, boom, 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 get 5 fish, come back to the dock, take the next kid, take him out, boom, 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 get 5 fish. He did that for, I don't recall exactly, but must have been at least 5 kids, 6 kids, taking one out at a time. So, if he took 5 kids out, that's 25 fish plus that's 30 walleyes right there. So he came home that day with I'm sure a couple coolers full of walleyes, enough fish, obviously, for the church fish fry. But that's the kind of population that Lake Wisconsin had, especially back in those days. And especially if you were a structure fisherman, you knew where to go. And I'm sure it was all these structures I told you where he probably fished. Was here, Moon Valley, or Sunset Bay, the break line on Moon Valley. Great walleye lake. It's still a very good walleye lake. It's obviously doesn't have the population it had back then. Back then, I mean, it was just like a crazy population of big fish. Now, I'd say I would classify it as a good walleye lake. Back in the mid 60s, early to mid 70s, it would probably be excellent. But you get a lot of shorts out here, up the 14 and a half, 14 and 3/4, but it's hard to say. But I would say on average, maybe 1 out of every 3 or 4 will be a legal fish. I will say one thing about the Wisconsin River system. As you know, I fish Peenwall flowage a lot. And I would say, although the average size fish I catch is much bigger at Peenwall, but if I'm looking for a fish over 28 inches, hands down, it's Lake Wisconsin. I personally never caught one over 28 inches at Peenwall. I've come close several times, but at Lake Wisconsin, I've caught several that were 28 to 30 inches. For some reason, Lake Wisconsin is known for producing big walleyes consistently. It's a really good lake to fish. I'll show you a little video clip of back in '92 when my friend Bob and I were fishing the Headwaters for walleyes, doing pretty good over there. I'm just going to pop up a couple of pictures on the screen here. Excuse me. That's probably the first big walleye I caught out of there. That's in front of the old bait shop, Red's bait shop that was there long gone now, but that was probably in the fall. That fish there. I enjoy crappie fishing there. Here's probably one of my first crappie trips out there. This is my first boat I had, so this was probably fall of '93, maybe '94. There's my brother with a stringer of the crappies there too. There's some limit walleyes up in the Headwaters. That's, I think, in the early '90s. Um, yeah, let's see here. I think I covered everything. I don't know if you have any questions. Oh, one thing I just want to go over really quick I didn't cover was the boat ramps. I'll just go over those really quick. There's, I think, 3 or 4 major boat ramps up in the headwaters. Now, there are some launches up in the headwaters, but they're just, you got to park on the street. It's a single row to go down and launch. I'm not going to show you those. I'm just going to show you the big main ones that have big parking lots here. That's up towards the headwaters right here. You've got one. If I'm fishing in the spring in the headwaters, I'm launching here. And I'm shooting around here, and then I'm right there in the headwaters. So there's one right there. If you go over here to just past Okie Bay over here, you got another big ramp over here. That's your second one. You know, I'll launch there too. And this is the one I use most of the time, though. It's in Sunset Bay, right over here. This is the one I'm using most of the time. Sunset Bay, right there. And those are the 3 main launches. And then I would say if their last main launch is in Moon Valley, if you're on the other side of the lake, you got to launch back at the end of Moon Valley. Pretty big launch over there. Gosh, I seem like I'm forgetting something, but if you have a question about anything, drop it in the comments. Just one other maybe quick thing to note is I get often asked a lot throughout the years, where is a lake that is close, not too far from Chicago, where you can rent a cabin and stay on a lake? And I tell everybody the closest lake to Chicago I know of is Lake Wisconsin for that. There are several places right in Okie over here. Oh, that's not Okie. Right over here, there's a few places where you can, right here, Burhops, Lakeside Lodge. Oh, it says temporary closed. Maybe that's because of the season now. But there used to be a couple of places over here that rent cabins. I think there's a place somewhere around here and up around here. There's a handful of places where you can rent cabins. So that's something else that's a little unique about the lake. And you do have a free ferry that operates April through November that crosses the lake over here. That's it. I'm going to show you a little short clip at the end here. Some that I pulled out of the archives back fishing the headwaters back in '92. And look in the description below if you want to see a more recent trip catching walleyes on this break line just above the bridge over here. Great lake. Still always been a consistent producer of walleyes. It's still that way. Yep. If I forgot something, anyone has a question, just drop it in the comments and I'll try to answer it. And I'll be doing another lake review here shortly. Thanks for watching.
Okay, yeah, we're recording now.
And it's Lake Wisconsin, 8 o'clock on May 30th. We've been fishing since 6:30, I think. You can see 5 keepers. We caught most of them in the morning or by noon, 1 at 3 o'clock, and nothing since except for a few small ones.
You hold up that biggest one. Oh, there you go.
Yeah. It's $10 a pound fillets, so there's maybe $80 here. A fun day. Lake Wisconsin, Sunday, May 31st, last day in May. More legal fish today, but not as big as yesterday, but we'll show you what we got. One nice one that was 22 inches, I believe. The rest, we got a total of 8. Mostly on 250s. I think all of them on 250. Maybe 1 or 2 when we came out at 200. But there's 8 of them there. Anything else of interest, Pat?
Yeah, hold them a little higher.
Oh, they're pretty heavy.
And Jim's favorite color is pink.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, should we show them the lure we got them on? The hot lure for the trip was the pink 250. It was a killer lure. Bob offered to pay $20 for it, but I refused to sell it.
And Jim is walking home.
Well,
let's see the long one again. There we go. Alright, now we can go home.